So today I am doing a review of Silver Linings Playbook, which actually made me pretty angry, hence the title of this video. So the reason I'm angry is because I do think the Silver Linings Playbook's portrayal of people with mental illness is actually quite detrimental and damaging to those people who live with mental illness throughout their lives. I know it's fiction, but I do feel that authors have a responsibility when they're writing about mental illness not to reinforce stereotypes. And unfortunately, I think this book does so. It seems to make out that mentally ill people are dangerous and unpredictable, and also that they're naive and childlike. So a quick summary of the plot. Silver Linings Playbook is about a man called Pat who appears to have had some psychotic breakdown following an incident where he almost killed his wife's lover. And the book opens with him coming out of the medical facility that he's been in to move back home with his parents. However, it also appears that he's entered some strange fugue state where he's lost 2 or 3 years of his life and seems to believe that he's still married to his wife and that they're just having some apart time, as he calls it, and that it's only been a few months, when in reality he's been in the medical facility for around about 3 years, although this is never really that clear, because one thing the other characters do in the book is they are not upfront with him. It's kind of like they're hiding reality from him, so he's never quite sure of what has happened. Obviously, fugue states do happen in mental illness, and they're really sort of like a hard reset that the brain does when it's suffered some real psychological trauma. Though psychologists and neuropsychologists aren't really sure what is happening. But one thing that we do know about fugue states is, first of all, they're extremely rare. They don't happen very often, and normally when they do happen, the person doesn't just forget 2 or 3 years of their lives. They forget absolutely everything. They forget themselves, so they forget their own identities. They may forget their nationality, and they certainly wouldn't remember any family or wives. So the portrayal of Pat as having this memory loss just doesn't ring true with what we know about fugue states. And also it's not clear whether what he did would have led to a fugue state. So we've got, and we don't actually know what particular mental illness he has. I think bipolar is mentioned. Once he's back home with his parents, he then hooks up with an old school friend of his and meets with another character called Tiffany, who is the sister of his friend's wife. And it turns out that she also has a mental illness because she suffered the bereavement of her husband, and she appears to have been suffering with depression and anxiety ever since. And really it's kind of a romance. It's him letting go of his wife Nikki and realising that Tiffany is the person that he should be thinking about and being with. So my biggest bugbear really is this association between violence and mental ill health. Throughout the novel, there's these moments where Pat appears to be losing it completely. For example, in his psychiatrist office, a song comes on by Kenny G, which we later on find out was the song that was played at his wedding, although he seems to have forgotten that. And he smashes up the office. There's also another incident where he hurts his mother by pushing her over. This really does annoy me and anger me, because people who are mentally ill generally are not a risk to anybody else. If anything, they're a risk to themselves, particularly if they're feeling suicidal. And this kind of, to me, lazy association of violence with mental illness plays into the hands of some of our worst media coverage around paranoid schizophrenic has murdered 2 people and so on. When you actually think about it, the majority of murders are conducted by people without mental illness. Some murders are conducted by people with mental illness, but predominantly, if you're going to be murdered, it's going to be by somebody who is not mentally ill. So I really, really dislike the way that this stereotype has been portrayed, because it's really unhelpful to people who have to deal with mental illness all day, every day. The other big problem I have is with the character of Pat himself. It's written in the first person narration, so it's from Pat's perspective. And we know that Pat was a history teacher and he's in his mid-30s. So clearly he was a relatively intelligent guy. He was able to manage his own life. Yet the voice of Pat in the novel is more like Forrest Gump. It's sort of slow, and as if this person has lost their intelligence as a result of their mental illness. And again, this is, you know, a really poor portrayal of people with mental illness. You know, just because you have depression or anxiety or bipolar or schizophrenia, it doesn't mean to say you're suddenly less intelligent than you were, or that you've suddenly become naive. Another issue is when you see him and Tiffany together, it seems like they've completely lost their social skills. So they're quite rude when they're out with people, and they're very blunt in how they talk to each other. It's almost like the author has thought, well, mental illness is like autism, so I'm going to give them some of the characteristics of people with autism. Again, you know, that's just ridiculous. Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects people's ability to understand the mind states of others. Being mentally ill does not affect your ability to understand the mind states of others. People with mental illness might become quite self-absorbed because they're just trying to cope with and get through the day, but they don't lose social skills. And in fact, you may meet many people during your day who are suffering with mental ill health, and you would never know it because they will probably overcompensate when they're in company and try and be overly nice and generous and kind. It's more likely that they will, when they get home, they will need to recover from that. But you certainly don't lose social skills when you have a mental illness. And finally, the way Patty's treated in the book is patronising and demeaning. So, for example, when he gets back to the home, he notices that the wedding pictures of him and Nikki are no longer on the walls. And he asks his mother about this. Instead of her telling him the truth, she treats him like he's a 5-year-old and makes up a story about the pictures being stolen when they were burgled, though nothing else got stolen. And Pat apparently buys this. It's, you know, I think it's really important to recognise that all of us at some points could have mental ill health caused by events outside of our control and personality factors. And this book, unfortunately, portrays people with mental ill health as needing to be protected from reality, as needing to be infantilized and patronised, and this really did make my blood boil. I really hate being negative about books that I read, but when it touches on areas that I know quite a lot about, I can't help but therefore look at the novel and say, okay, well, what's it saying about this? However, I don't want to end this review negatively, so I want to end it with giving some examples of novels that I think portray mental ill health in a much more realistic way and show characters to be much more rounded than the ones in the Silver Linings Playbook. These novels I'm going to mention next, basically what they do is they don't tend to differentiate. They don't seem to say, right, we have mentally ill people here and normal people here. These novels recognise that we can all be here, but we can all go to there, to being mentally ill, and we can all come back to being mentally well again. So they don't sort of differentiate, as in the Silver Linings Playbook, with these characters are normal and they're sorted, and these characters are ill and need help. So I'm going to start with a lovely novel by Anthony Marr called A Constellation of Vital Phenomena. And this novel deals with the impact of civil war on people. The characters in this novel are obviously all affected in different ways, and they all have psychological distress as a result of the civil war in Chechnya. But this novel basically shows that we can still function when we are psychologically distressed, that we can overcome events and difficulties in our lives, and we can come out the other side stronger. So unlike Silver Linings Playbook, where the characters seem to have lost all sense of compassion, they've become very egocentric and childlike, in this novel, the characters remain compassionate, they remain humane, and they remain able to function. Damaged, but able to function. The second novel I want to mention is Poppy Shakespeare by Clare, which is an unflinching look at what it's like to be within the mental health system in the UK. It is fiction, but it's, you know, clearly very much based. The author must have a great deal of experience in this area, and it looks at some of the issues around discharge and what help is available in the community. It's also a first-person narrative, and I did slightly struggle with the voice of the narrator to begin with, because it did again seem quite childlike and naive. But then the story drew me in, and the character certainly has a huge amount of insight, unlike the characters in Silver Linings Playbook. The third novel I want to mention is Hot Milk by Deborah Levy, and this is about a mother and daughter, and it's really about the fact that physical illness can often have a psychological basis to it. So in the novel, the daughter and the mother travel, I think it's to Greece, in order for the mother to seek a specialist to help her with her vague physical ailments. But it actually turns out that her physical ailments are connected to psychological distress, and therefore the novel very much looks at how we need to treat people holistically and not just treat the head and the body, but treat them completely. So the next one is Panopticon by Jenni Fagan. Though this doesn't directly explore mental ill health, it explores the impact of being in care and having multiple placements on children in the UK, and how we tend to criminalise young people who are in the care system rather than understand where their behaviours are coming from. So looking at the fact that they may not have attachment to an adult, therefore they have no one that's holding their mind in their mind, as parents do with children, and it looks at the impact of not having that secure base on young people growing up, and what impact that then has on the way that they behave. So that's Panopticon, Jenni Fagan. And the final recommend is Night Waking by Sarah Moss, which explores the impact of having children on a woman's ability to then move on in her career, and how sleepless nights can affect you, and how the divisions of labour in the household may not always be fair. And through the novel you get the sense that she's almost losing it, but the good thing about the novel is it also demonstrates that, again, you can come through this. So I think what all these novels demonstrate is that mental ill health can affect anyone at any point in their lives. And I think that's really, really important to get across in fiction about mental illness and psychological distress. So, as I've said, Silver Linings Playbook for me was a letdown, but more than that, it made me angry because it portrays mentally ill people in a very negative way. There are many more better novels out there that touch on psychological distress, but do it in a way that is not stigmatising and that actually brings understanding. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please leave a comment below and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.